Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Safiyyah, your host. I'm here with a special guest today, Dr. Zaheera Soomar. She was on the Global Sumud Flotilla alongside a bunch of international volunteers looking to bring aid into Gaza and end the blockade. I'm here with Dr. Zahira to speak about her experiences. Dr. Zahira, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so honored to finally meet you. I've been following you on social media, all of your escapades and things that you're doing, and it's really exciting to see that. I'm just a bystander seeing all your adventures, and I'm really impressed with all of the work that you're doing, your bravery, your courage, and just your initiative. There are very few people who are making the sort of sacrifices that you are making for the cause of Gaza.
Inshallah, may we all be able to rise up and get more courage.
I mean. So tell me where you get this courage and motivation, Dr. Zahira.
I think a few different places. I don't think there's just one underlying factor. And I also just don't think it's always there. I think it's something that goes up and down in life, and it's based on circumstances. But a few different places. I think, look, as a South African, I think we have it in us to fight for justice. I think those of us that were still born in the apartheid and had a few years in apartheid still have memory or even DNA that, experienced what apartheid felt like and experienced injustice or just being inferior or a minority or different.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's an aspect of that. I also grew up in a household where I was also taught, to stand up and to speak up and to never just tolerate. So that just was my upbringing as well. And then I think from a Palestinian perspective, we've always fought for Palestine. It's something that even as a child, I remember going to protests. I remember holding the Palestinian flag and chanting "Free, free Palestine." It's not something new that we just woke up to or decided this is a cause to kind of support. When I started my first job in Cape Town in South Africa, it was an oil and gas company. There were a few times where I just did certain things in a certain way, and people would ask me, why do you always do that to yourself? Why do you always put yourself on the lower level? Why do you always infuriate yourself? Why do you pretend? Why do you be the minority in the situation? And I realized this was 20 years ago, that it's so ingrained into me that I was indoctrinated to believe I'm less than because of the way that I was, or the country that I grew up in, that you are a minority, you are less than. There are other people who are more privileged than you or are better than you, even from a skin color, a race, a gender perspective, etc. I wasn't conscious of this. And so when I was made aware of it, I think I went on a journey of trying to course correct that and unlearn all of that. And I think in the process, I maybe swung very far on the pendulum. Now I find it very difficult to keep quiet. So, a lot of the times people will now tell me, you need to learn to play the game. Don't always speak up for everything. Don't always stand up for everything. Learn to play the game that gets you further. I think I find that very difficult. And sometimes it does hurt me. So I just think I went from being on one side to now being completely on the other side. And maybe there's...
But we need people like that, right? Because I feel like there's a lack of courage amongst people in my circles. I feel like people are, they sympathize a little bit with the Palestinian cause, but they're not really changing their lives or doing very much. They're not even speaking out, right? They're afraid to speak out. And they're telling others not to speak out as well, right? So I'm glad that there are individuals like yourselves who we can look up to and see, okay, there's an example of somebody who has sacrificed so much, and, maybe we can follow in their footsteps in some way, maybe not in the full extent, but some way. So thank you for doing that. I know you've sacrificed so much, like you've lost jobs and things like that. Can you speak a little bit about that to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've November 2023, I lost my job. I was in a pretty big global mining company. I was, again, speaking up for Palestine, nothing specific to the organization itself, but really just speaking up for justice for Palestinians, freedom for Palestinians, but also just doing a lot on the boycotting and talking about complicity of governments and complicity of companies and how we need to be more conscious consumers, etc. And the organization that I was with at that time did not want me to speak up. And it later came out that they were complicit in some way or form as well. And that's what they were a bit kind of concerned about. And so I landed up losing my job in November 2023. I also landed up being on Canary mission in March 2024, and that's really impacted me in North America and my ability to find a job. I've had multiple job offers during the course of 2024, and every time they go for the background check or the reference check, Canary mission comes up. It impacts me. And then we landed up leaving Canada at the beginning of this year.
You and your family?
Me and my family.
Okay.
We landed up leaving. I mean, a number of things happened last year, apart from me losing my job and kind of not landing other work. I was also targeted by the Zionist entity. They were following me. They would publicly post where I am. I used to get death threats and rape threats, and we used to get calls. And at one point, we were even concerned about our children. And so, at the beginning of this year, we decided, okay, let's leave. We may come back at some point, but we need to live and we need to earn. And I want to be able to kind of speak freely, and be able to have that freedom of speech. And so we did leave. We landed up moving back to the Middle East. It's where we used to stay kind of before we moved to Canada. And again, I found something. I was lecturing at a university, working as a professor. And when I decided to go on the Global Sumud Flotilla, I took leave, but again, once they found out what I was doing, I was let go of. So, again, lost my job. Now I've got to be ever so cautious. I think I'm on the verge of maybe even getting kicked out of the Middle East because there's no freedom of speech there.
Yeah.
So
may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you.
Inshallah.
You're very agile on your feet, so I'm sure you'll be able to find something else eventually. We'll make dua for you. So tell me about the flotilla experience. Why did you decide to get on this flotilla?
One, because I was given the opportunity.
Okay.
And I felt
Did
honored.
someone approach you?
Yeah. So I was considered on. I was supposed to be on the flotilla last year that was leaving Turkey, which never ever left because of bureaucratic sabotage. And when I was contacted this year about the Global Sumud Flotilla, there's a few things. One, I felt honored to fight in this way. I felt honored to be able to go and represent the countries that I can represent, and also just give of myself, right? This is I know we don't use the word jihad from that perspective, but this is an ability to use your body and your mind and your time in a way for our ummah, right? And for justice. And I felt honored. So that was part of it. The other part was, I think we were just running out of opportunities of what to do. It's over 2 years of a genocide. We have boycotted, lobbied, protested, pulled sanctions. We've been taking to the streets, and here in Canada, week on week on week. And it just feels like, what else do we have to do to actually stop the bombing and killing of Palestinians on a daily basis? And we've got to do something insane, and this felt like something insane. So, yeah, it was, I just felt like, why not? Why not?
So tell me what it was like on the boat with everyone else. When I see the images, I see people in the dark, right? I think that's the video that everybody sees, like a bunch of people in the dark with their life jackets on, but they seem like they're in such good spirits. So what's going on the boat? What's happening on a day-to-day basis?
A lot happens on the boat. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the images you probably see and a lot of the videos that you probably get, a lot of that's probably what's happening at night with our drone attacks and our drills and kind of in the scary moments. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of difficulty, there's a lot of challenge, there's a lot of beauty that happens on the boats and even in the prison itself.
Even in the prison?
Even in the prison, right? Like the beautiful moments are, you have hundreds of people from 47 different countries there for humanity and the freedom of Palestinians. You all rallying around that. It's the two common threads that every single person aligns to. And it's the common thread that you can always use and pull at when you need to, okay? The harder side is, the more challenging side is that you have 47 nationalities that each have 47 ways of doing things differently, different cultures, different belief systems, different ethnicities. What you deem as cleanliness on a boat is very different across the board, right? And so you also can't impose your views or your expectations on others. You have to remember you're there for the mission. You have to remember you're there for the people of Gaza. But you are still on a boat for 3 weeks in a very small place.
Yes.
You
Shared
have no
washrooms.
you have no privacy. There's no boundaries. You don't have a bedroom. You have an allocated bed for a few hours that is being rotated amongst a few people.
Wow.
So it's not even your bed and your space.
Mm-hmm.
When you want to break, there's no privacy. There's no closing the door. You can't escape anybody. So you in each other's faces 24/7 for 3 weeks solid, with a bunch of challenges that you have to navigate on and find common ground and common ways of doing things, even things like cooking, right? There's a designated person who's cooking a meal, breakfast, lunch, or supper every single day, and you all take turns. But everybody has different preferences for food. So even something as simple as that can be difficult sometimes. You might have to eat something that you don't know what that is, and you might not like the taste of it, but you need to eat, right? And at the same time, you're feeling completely seasick. And while you're sitting and you're eating, you're being rocked from this side of the boat to the other. Sometimes there's plates flying. At one point, our boat was so rocky. We had pots with food flying and food landing on the floor and flames, the stove going on flames. These are just things you have to deal with. The toilet doesn't work half of the time, and you've got to deal with situations like that. So there's a lot of challenging aspects to it. And then again, beautiful but challenging is that I think it's beautiful that this is not a brown people's mission.
Yes.
And it's also not a Muslim or Islamic mission. This was people from all walks of life, all nationalities, all race being there, and even different religions. And, there are some people that were atheists that don't even believe in God, but it's the humanity that brings you there. So even how you talk to each other and how you center or root the conversation, the way I would do it with you, and we can always relate from a Dean perspective, you can't.
Yes.
So, you have to find other ways to relate to people and other ways to find commonality and other ways to manage conflict or manage a situation. So it was beautiful and it was challenging, but we're also human. And, we know we're heading to Gaza. We know there are people dying, but at the same time, you can exist in laughter. And you can exist in enjoying each other's company. And you can exist in learning about each other and building relationships and smiling and bonding. And so all of these things do coexist. So it was.
So it was a great learning experience.
It was a great learning experience.
So as you approached the Israeli authorities, at what point did you start getting afraid?
I think we started getting afraid long before we got into the orange and red zone, because we started having drone attacks from Tunis already. And so, here you're in a sovereign state, your boats are still in sovereign territorial waters, and you're being bombed, and you're being threatened with your life, and your boats are being attacked to disable everything. At that point, before we even got on boats, it became very apparent that there's a big risk. And there are some people in Tunis that made decisions that do not get on boats because I think you know what you're signing up for, but I don't think you quite know what you're signing up for. Reality
because you've never
you,
experienced it before,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Reality hits you very fast. And so there are quite a few people in Tunis that decided not to get on boats. Once you're in international waters, we had drones every single night above us, every single night. And just before we got into Greek territorial waters, or before we were hitting the kind of the Greek coast, that's when we had the drone attacks, 17 drone attacks. And reality hits you. You realize I'm in international waters, I'm protected by a flag and 47 countries, yet the Zionist entity feels they can absolutely ignore international law and come and strike you without a care in the world. It hits you very fast that they won't think twice about killing you. Your life means nothing to them. Like it really is a moment of just reality. And so I think probably when we had the 17 drone attacks, I think that's when kind of fear and reality of fear struck a lot of people. Again, when we got closer to the 150 nautical miles and in the 120 nautical miles, there's a different set of fear that kicks in because now that's where they classify as being the orange and the red zone.
Yes.
That's where you're likely to see them come to you. that's where they might even attack you physically with them being in front of you. So it's a different fear, and it's a different set of preparation that you go into.
So how were the participants coping with this kind of anxiety, fear, uncertainty in that situation?
I think different people cope with it differently.
Okay.
I think as a Muslim, I really lean into my deen, and I really lean into the idea of just surrendering my safety and just having tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I made a lot of dua. On my first boat, we were a Muslim majority boat, so there was a lot of dhikr taking place. And then there are other people who are not Muslim. Some people meditate, kind of talk about bringing themselves to a center of calmness and clarity. Other people do other things. Everybody has different ways of how to manage their stress, manage their anxiety. What we try to do as a group is try to prepare as best as possible. So, information is power. Make sure people are aware, understand what drone attacks look like, understand how they can identify each drones, whether it's an explosive drone, a chemical drone, an information drone, a data drone, etc. Giving people the ability to manage what they see and how they identify it, that's powerful. And every day we did drills on our boats, every single day. So when the time came where you actually had to do it really, and it wasn't just a drill, we had done it so many times that even if you went into a kind of fight or flight mode or I'm blanking out, your body has done it a few times that it has the ability to do it.
So what do you do when a drone attacks? What's your response?
Right. So there's different things. If it's a fire, there's a different. Most of the drills consisted of putting your life jackets on, always having your passport on you, always having shoes that were closed on the top deck. Most of the times we were wearing open shoes because the boat would get wet, seawater would come in. But once you went into a fire, a drone, or a attack situation, you were not allowed to go to the lower deck. And the reason being is, one, if there's a fire, you're at risk. But if you're having a drone attack, or if you're having an attack, or if you're having interception, or if the IOF are surrounding you, if you went into the lower deck, they would make a bunch of assumptions of why you're going down below. And you are putting your entire boat at risk and at safety. And so there were certain things that you had to keep above board, keep ready. There were certain things like we had cutlery ready in a specific place, like our knives and our forks and our spoons, and even poles or sticks ready that we could chuck overboard, because those can be misconstrued as weapons. So things were in very specific places to be grabbed, to be put on, to be like your life jackets, etc. And then there was a position that you took. So you had to get rid of your phones, you had to get rid of all electronics. Nothing needed to be on you except your passport. You needed a single layer of clothing. And if you were in a fire, depending on where the fire was, you're either gathering there, or you're gathering there, or you're gathering above board. If you're in a drone attack, you're gathering in a different space because you need a bit of shelter. If you're being intercepted, you had to go to the front of your deck where it's open so you could be seen, and your hands had to be up like this, not like this, but like this. So every type of situation had a different drill with an understanding behind why.
Yes. So Zahira, walk me through what it was like when the Israeli authorities started approaching, and then when they entered and got onto the boat.
Yeah, so we got intercepted on the morning of the 2nd of October, the Thursday.
Okay. That was 3 weeks in?
That was 3 weeks in. So we were on day 18 already, day 19.
Okay.
The night before is when we hit we actually thought we were going to get intercepted 2 days before, because we hit the 120 nautical miles and we were prepared. But that night we had drones and we had drone attacks, and so we didn't get intercepted. So the next night we were pretty sure this is going to we're now sitting at the 60, 50 nautical mile zone. We're pretty close to Gaza. We were pretty sure we're going to get intercepted. That Wednesday night, IOF did approach most of the boats, in fact, maybe all of the boats. And by 9 p.m., boats were starting to be intercepted.
And you could see that happening?
You could see that happening. Okay. So we also had security room that all the boat managers were on, and everything was being managed by the ground team and the boat managers. So all the SOSs were going out. All the security alerts were going out. Footage was being shared. You could see what was happening to all the 40-odd boats on international waters. Our boat got approached by IOF that night. We were towards the back of the fleet, and the IOF approached us. They spoke to us on the VHF. I was the one that spoke to them. They asked us to speed up and go east. And I said to them, we are going east, but we can't speed up because our engine's broken.
Mhm.
And they watched us for a little bit and then they left. And so they went and they intercepted some of the boats that were much closer to the shores of Gaza. The next morning, we said, okay, they're probably going to come to us. At around 7 a.m. on the Situation Room, I had seen the last kind of boat apart from us being intercepted. So at that point, I said to my team, get ready, get in position. They're probably going to be coming our way in the next hour. Nothing happened in that hour. And so I actually started speaking to the captain and I said, maybe they've forgotten about us. And I actually phoned the ground team and I said, can you take us off the radar, like off the tracker?
Mhm.
Maybe they've forgotten about us and maybe we can actually go further.
Mhm.
And so they had tried to remove us off the tracker. And we had started going into the mode of, let's plan of what we're going to do with this aid, how we get it to the shores of Gaza.
Okay.
So we were
Okay.
also starting to get the life raft ready. And we were looking at our dinghy and seeing if we could attach our outboard motor to our dinghy. And we were talking about which boxes of aid we put onto which things based on the weight. So we were going into that mode.
Yeah.
And from the corner of my eye, around 9:30 a.m., I see kind of one of the Israeli warships. And I said, okay, guys, they haven't forgotten about us. Get into kind of place. We're going to be intercepted. I think the benefit of that is it wasn't as scary because it was daytime.
Mhm.
And when you're getting intercepted at night, there's low visibility. You don't have lights around you.
Yes.
There's no light pollution around you. So it's pretty dark.
Mhm.
And so it can feel very scary.
Mhm. Mhm.
When you get intercepted in the day, you can see everything.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
a lot of that maybe fear isn't there because you have visibility. You can manage yourself. It just feels maybe safer, but not safe, but safer.
And then you'd probably seen all the other boats get intercepted as well. So you just thought, okay, it's coming.
It is coming.
Yeah.
You also have a lot more information of how 46 other boats were intercepted, how it played out. So again, information is power, right? So you feel a lot more in control. So yes, they approached us, one warship on either side. They deployed 2 Zodiacs, the Black Ribs. On each Zodiac, there was about 12 IOF soldiers. They both came right in front of our boat. They didn't even speak to us on the VHF because they were pretty close to us. And the one IOF soldier said, how many people are you on boat? And I said, we are 6 people. They said, are you all above board? I said, we're all above board. We have our life jackets on and our passports. They asked us, do you have any weapons on board? And I said, we have no weapons. At that point, we had thrown
all the cutlery.
all the cutlery, and everybody's phone had been thrown overboard except mine.
Mm-hmm.
That was also part of the protocol because everybody's phone had a lot of personal and mission information. The protocol was you need to be okay with throwing your phone overboard because they cannot get access to this information.
Mm-hmm.
So I had mine on me, and they said, they also said, so I assume you've all thrown your phones overboard because now they've seen 46 boats do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to them, yes, all phones are thrown overboard except the one that's in my hand. This is a phone, not a weapon. And that's because I'm live streaming. And he said, I'm going to need that phone. And I said, you're welcome to come and get it. You'll have to come on board and get it. They basically did their speech, which was, we are now approaching. We are not here to hurt you. We know you're exhausted, but we are going to come on board and we're going to take control of your vessel. And they did exactly that. And there was a protocol. We followed protocol. We knew what to expect. It was kind of going through the motion.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was.
Mm-hmm. So what was it like? I mean, you got arrested. You were put in prison. What was that experience like? I mean, imagine it was the first time you've ever experienced anything like this.
I mean, I've been arrested before at protests and I've been detained before. And I think a lot of people on this mission have. That was also one of the things that was critical about how they chose people for this mission. It was people who have fought the fight for Palestine for a long time, who have risked things, who've been at the front line of protests, who have been arrested, who have been maybe mishandled in a way and, been cable tied, who have slept in a prison before, people who knew would mentally and emotionally be able to get through this. So most of us had been through something like that before. But on the boat, it was very going through the motions and a lot of propaganda, right? One of the ribs had IOF soldiers that were taking photos and videos. So they were trying to portray this, we are moral army type of thing. So they spoke to you in a very nice way. They even offered you water. They didn't display a lot of harsh tactics. when the cameras were not filming. And so they were pretty moral in the way that they were trying to treat you for propaganda purposes. Once we got to Ashdod port, that's when things changed. That's when really fear struck. The way they handled you, the type of the soldiers that were there, the caliber of the soldiers, the way they pushed you on the ground, the way they tied your hands together, the look in their eyes. From then onwards, you were dealing with very different people. And it was pretty scary.
So Dr. Zahira, how long were you in prison?
I was there for 6 days. So once we got intercepted, interception took about 10 hours. We were at Ashdod port, I would say, for between, depending on when you got intercepted, but anything between maybe 6 to 12 to 18 hours. And then I was in prison for 6 days.
What was that experience like? Walk us through it.
Prison was interesting.
Okay.
I think it was also different for different people. And I think that there was a post that I did about this as well, where I talked about the level of privilege and what that did for your experience in prison. I think that people from Global South experienced prison very differently to people from Global North or people that had a lot more privilege from a societal standpoint. And the reason why I say that is because in prison you were treated like nothing. You were treated like you don't matter, like you don't have rights, like you are inferior. And in life, minorities do get treated like that a lot of the times. In the workplace, in society, even when it comes to human rights, you are less than, right? Even just the way you get, even looks, right? So even as a hijabi, depending on which country you live in, sometimes you get looked down on.
It's true.
In the workplace, if you're a person of color, you get treated differently. As a female, if you're walking into a boardroom and there's a bunch of males, you're walking in with no credibility and you have to kind of prove your credibility, prove your trust. So people who came from certain countries or held certain passports or were considered minorities in their society, I think had a higher level of tolerance, and not everything shook you up.
But where do you sit on that spectrum? Because you're hijabi, you're brown.
Like
right?
Yes. So I feel like I was pretty low down in the kind of the societal chain, right? I'm brown, I'm a Muslim, I'm a hijabi, I have a Global South passport. I grew up in a Global South country. I was there on my Global South passport as well. So I feel, and I grew up in an apartheid society when I was born, for the first couple of years of my life. And so, and I've always worked in very male-dominated white corporates, and I've always had to prove myself, and I've always been treated differently and treated as a minority. And you've had the harassment, you've had the aggressive behavior, you've had the microaggressions. It's just something that is so common in your daily life. When you're being treated like that, not everything's like, oh my God, how dare you speak to me that way? How dare you treat me? How dare you take my rights away? And we had our rights taken away. As South Africans, not everybody had this, but as South Africans, we were not allowed a lawyer, right? We did not get outside time. We did not get showers in prison. I was not allowed the 72-hour detention form. We were not allowed to see our consular for 3 to 4 days, whereas others were.
Okay.
And so we were penalized even more. It was frustrating and it was hard and it was painful, but it also wasn't something new. And so I think some of us just had higher tolerance levels. So there was that aspect. There was the aspect of the constant brutality. Sometimes you had to watch people being beaten up. Sometimes you were being beaten up. Every 2 hours we had armed guards come into our cells pointing guns at your forehead, dogs in your faces, constant changes. Every night we were gassed in our cells. So there was a lot of everything. And I think we were all, a lot of the time you were in survival and coping mechanism of like, do not break. Do not allow them to break you. Just take each hour as it comes. You will get through this. And I think some of the things we told ourselves were, remember, we will get out, right? Like,
yes, I imagine you must have thought, okay, you must have been thinking back to the plight of Palestinians and thinking there's no way for them to get out. And at
but
least we have an
that's the
opportunity
thing.
and a
So
chance. Yeah.
we reminded ourselves of, despite me being at the bottom of the food chain in terms of minority, I was still
You're
extremely
still better off.
privileged
Yes.
than the Palestinians. And so there was one aspect of, we knew we'd get out. We don't know when, but we knew we'd get out. And so you hung on to that. The other aspect that we hung on to was that the Palestinians have it so much worse than us. They don't have the things that we have, right? You can't ask for water. They don't get a lawyer. They don't get a consular visit. There is no hope of getting out. For them, they're there sometimes for 22 years with no official charge against them. And so even on the walls in our prison, we had messages from some of the Palestinians that were there 2 weeks before us from Gaza. In my cell, I had 2 doctors, one from Al-Shifa Hospital and one from Al-Nasser Hospital, write their names and leave us a message. And it was dated September 2025.
Amazing.
That was 2 weeks before we were there. And so you hung on to some of these things. You know, it was, you had to find hope and courage from wherever you could.
Dr. Zahira, do you think that the Freedom Flotilla had a benefit or an advantage? I mean, there's been so much commentary about them, and some people have said, well, they're a waste of money, they're a waste of resources. What do you think of that? Do you think there's an advantage to it?
I think so. Look, ultimate success for us was to break that illegal siege and deliver humanitarian aid. That was our ultimate goal, and that would have been kind of ultimate success for us. But I don't think that was the only goal and the only measure of success. Firstly, let me say, none of the money that was spent on the Sumud Flotilla was government money or tax-paying money.
Okay.
So we didn't take from a government society. Government did not fund us. It was not tax-paying money. This was all donor money, private pledges, people raising money from the flotilla for the flotilla. This was us giving money towards this cause, right? And so we were risking our own money, our own savings. And everything that I did, and the same with the other 490 odd people, going to Tunis, staying in Tunis, whatever we took on that boat, and flying home was paid by myself or my family. I did not rely on donor money, neither did I rely on government money. Even my South African government did not fly me there or fly me home when I was deported. It was all self-funded, right? So it's not government money and not tax-paying money. What did we achieve? We achieved and we showed that this is not a brown mission. This is not a Muslim mission. This is about humanity. Okay. We showed that there are 47 nationalities that are willing to stand up from Global North and Global South that care and are willing to fight for the plight of the Palestinians, even by risking their own lives. Right. The other thing we showed is we showed the power of the people, and I'll specifically come to that with regards to Canada. But we showed that people have power. And I think this was maybe one of the most important messages, that I don't think our communities and our people realize just how much power they do have. And if everybody acted on that, we would be in a very different situation on a number of different things right now. So I think we showed the world that the people do have the power. And secondly, there's been pressure on governments, right? For the very first time, we had a Spanish, Italian, Greek, and Turkish Navy ship being on international waters with a freedom flotilla, not there to fight with us, but either to protect us or support us or give us aid or rescue us in some way or form. That's unprecedented, and that's never happened. And subsequently, we've seen decisions being made. We've seen governments say that if Netanyahu comes into our country, they'll be arrested. We've seen dock workers stop their jobs. We've seen university students take to the streets and not attend classes. We've seen political mandates come out. We've seen ministries or ministers change. We've seen certain European countries put out statements around the flotilla and support for it, or the humanitarian aid, or the illegal siege. We've had a vote at United Nations. So it's pushed boundaries.
Yes.
And therein lies the success of this. And what we now need to do is continue with the momentum. The flotilla has stopped and been intercepted, but the movement does not stop.
So how do we continue the movement to, continue the conversation, Dr. Zahira? Because, we are in a ceasefire right now, but Israel continues to violate it, right? I mean, the genocide, it seems to have ended in the sense that it's, it's not obvious and spectacular anymore, but people are still being killed, and, the borders are not open and aid is not getting in. So there are a lot of things that need to change.
Absolutely.
So what do you think needs to be done now by the people? As you said, the people do have power. What do you
people
want
do
to
have
see the
power.
people do?
Take hold of that power, right? Do not press pause. We are not in a ceasefire, right? A ceasefire means nobody is being bombed, nobody is being killed, and humanitarian corridor is open. Those things are not being honored. So there is no ceasefire. People are dying at the moment. The reason you're not seeing as much come out of Gaza is because most of the journalists have also been killed. We've seen a few of our journalists being killed in the past 2 weeks, right? Those that were actually reporting. So it's not that things have changed. It's less news is coming out because those that were reporting are being killed. We're seeing more hospitals and more medical workers dying. These atrocities are continuing. We have to stop this. And I think what's happening and what's sad for me is people are becoming numb, or they already are numb.
Or they're moving on to the next issue.
They're moving on to the next issue, right? Like, even when you look at social media and you look at the feed on your social media, people are going back to what was and what is. It's now 2 years into a genocide. I'm tired of talking about the genocide. This is this feeling that's underlying in our communities, right? Even boycotting is taking a drop at the moment.
This is true, yes.
And that's sad, because if one thing, we've seen the impact of the boycotts. You've seen the number of Starbucks that have closed. McDonald's, Nestle announced a layoff. I think it was a couple of thousand people that they lay off, citing the boycotting on them and that they've had to close factories down.
I didn't know that about Nestle. Yeah.
And so we can see the impacts of boycotting. What we now need to do is continue to do everything we have been, continuing to speak about Gaza, continuing to have all eyes on Gaza, continuing to boycott, continuing with our protests, continuing with the government lobby. But what we need to do now is people need to realize they have power and they need to speak up. I ask people, it's not good enough to just post. And it's not good enough to just attend an event. My question to you is, what are you risking? Because if you aren't willing or aren't risking anything, there isn't going to be a shift. We have to be risking something. Something's got to give in order for a shift to change. If you are not risking anything, status quo stays the same. If you are going to work every day, working for a complicit company, not saying anything, but on the side, you're just posting Free Palestine. What does that do? It doesn't do anything. So we have to be willing to take risks. That doesn't mean everybody has to jump on a flotilla, and it doesn't mean you have to risk your life, and it doesn't mean you have to risk your children or your family's safety or security, but risk something.
Yes, yes.
Right? Like, take a risk and put your trust in Allah. We know that the outcome sits with Allah, but we also have to do the work, right? And we know this from the Sunnah. We know this from all the battles. We know this from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, that they know, if anybody, they know the outcome sits with Allah. But none of them sat quietly. They went out and they fought. They fought for justice. When nobody believed anything they were saying, they spoke the truth. They got spat at, they got thrown at, they got injured, they got attacked. But they fought. We need to fight.
What's next for you, Dr. Zahira?
I don't know. I keep fighting. Fighting for the freedom of Palestinians, and not just Palestinians, but Sudanese, Congolese. Fighting against injustice has become very central to who I am and what my world is about. It's not a side passion. And for me, it's not a cause that I'm passionate about. It is a very big part of who I am and what I spend my day on, and the people I spend my time with, and how I fill my time, and how I spend my time doing things or thinking about things. It's very central to that. So even, I lecture and I teach, and a lot of what I teach and lecture brings in all of these concepts in order to teach what I want to teach. It's a very big, prominent thing in our household. We speak about this all the time. It's central to who we are, central to who my family is. And so our life is very much structured around, taking risks and fighting for against injustice.
That's so beautifully put. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in your work and give you success and give you the strength to be able to carry on and make a difference.
I mean,
and may we be inspired by what you're doing as
Inshallah.
well.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zahira, for joining us. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
It's a pleasure too. Thank you for having me.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Media Hub, the new home of Let the Quran Speak.
Here we spread positivity and good. We help people experience the beauty of Islam and help them appreciate and understand Muslims.
This beautiful building we purchased at cost $2.3 million.
Yeah, we've already raised a third of that money, and with your help, inshallah, we can pay off the rest.
So we're looking for people who can give $1,000 each. If you can be part of the select group, that's amazing.
Otherwise, just please give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
It's our collective responsibility to share the message of Islam with our fellow human beings. Please help us continue this good work.
It's a sadaqah jariyah, something that will continue to be a benefit to the Muslim community long after Safiyyah and I are gone.
Please support our work at muslimmediahub.com.
Your support is zakat eligible and tax deductible.
May Allah bless you and your loved ones today and always. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.